Joran stepped off the sleek transport platform and felt a strange weight pressing in his mind, though he couldn't see it. The alien city stretched before him, glowing with soft light that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Towers spiraled into the sky, made of a smooth, translucent material that shimmered with colors he didn't recognize. He had been briefed on alien architecture before, of course, but seeing it in person was nothing like reading a report. Every line, every curve seemed alive. He adjusted the collar of his uniform. Humans had never visited the heart of the Clivian Empire before. The alien queen ruled here, a being of immense intelligence and even greater psychic ability. The reports had described her as able to read the thoughts of anyone who enters her court. Joran swallowed, feeling the tiniest shiver run down his spine. The doors of the court opened with a whisper of energy. A long hall stretched before him, lined with alien guards who did not move like humans. Their limbs bent at strange angles, their skin shimmered, and their large eyes tilted in ways that made Joran feel like he was being measured. He reminded himself to breathe, to act calm. Every human instinct in him screamed that these beings could sense fear, hesitation, even the tiniest uncertainty. At the end of the hall, the throne rose like a monument. The alien queen sat upon it, her body tall and elegant, draped in fabrics that flowed like liquid light. Her skin was the color of polished stone, and her eyes glowed faintly, changing shades as she observed Joran. A ripple of energy, almost like a hum, seemed to pass through the hall, and Joran's mind felt the faintest brush of thought. Not his own, but something reaching toward him. He stopped. He had been told not to speak first, to let her initiate contact. And then, to his astonishment, she did. "Careful, human. I hear everything." The words were soft, almost melodic, but they carried weight. Joran froze. He hadn't said a single word. Not aloud, not even in thought, at least consciously. And yet, here she was, speaking directly to him. He bowed slightly, not knowing if it was correct protocol. The queen's expression did not change, but the glow in her eyes intensified, as if she were peering into the corners of his mind, searching for any hidden intention. "Your reports are interesting," she said, her voice a mixture of curiosity and warning. "But reports do not show the human mind. Only you can." Joran swallowed again, forcing calm. He had been trained for diplomatic missions, had practiced negotiation thousands of times. Yet this was unlike any situation he had faced. He could feel the alien's attention, a sharp, probing awareness that made it impossible to hide even the smallest thought. He nodded, trying to convey respect without speaking. The queen seemed to understand. The court around him was silent, except for a faint hum of energy. No one moved, but Joran could feel them watching. Every alien in the room was attuned to the queen's will, and through her, to him. A moment passed. Then, without warning, the queen's eyes shifted toward the side, and a vision flickered across Joran's mind. It was a test. Images of conflict appeared, flashes of alien soldiers, human diplomats in tense negotiation, and scenarios he had studied but never imagined in real life. Each vision demanded a reaction, but he could not speak. He could not reveal strategy or fear. Instead, he moved. His hands, his posture, the tilt of his head, all became instruments of communication. He mirrored the calm confidence he had learned to project in human diplomacy. Slowly, the visions receded, and he realized the queen was watching, judging every subtle motion, every blink, every breath. "You are cautious," she said finally, her tone almost approving. "Not the first human I have met, but perhaps the first one who understands silence as a language." Joran's heart raced. Was this approval? Curiosity? Threat? He could not tell. The humans in the transport briefing had warned him. Never assume the aliens' reactions were like humans. Every gesture, every glance could mean multiple things simultaneously. He stayed silent, letting the weight of the moment settle. Around him, the court seemed to shift subtly. The architecture itself, he realized, was part of the queen's test. The walls, the floors, even the air seemed alive with her awareness. He had to trust his instincts. The very human traits the aliens had never fully understood. Intuition, adaptability, and emotional intelligence. The queen tilted her head, as if she were reading something deep within him. "Humans, you are strange. You are fragile, yet you endure. You are small, yet you influence things far beyond your size. I have seen many species. None behave like you." Why? Joran hesitated. He could not answer fully. Words were dangerous here. thoughts could betray him. Instead, he gestured subtly toward the central dais of the throne room. His eyes held a calm confidence. He wanted to show that he had courage, that he could handle what came next without speaking. The queen's eyes narrowed. "Interesting," she said. Then she leaned forward slightly, her gaze piercing. "Tell me, human, how much do you understand of what you face? How much can you see without words?" He held her gaze. Slowly, deliberately, he lifted one hand, palm outward, a gesture of peace. Another small gesture, barely perceptible, indicated awareness of the court's attention. The queen's lips curved, almost a smile, but not quite. "You are clever," she said, "but cleverness is not enough here. Actions speak louder than thought. Silence may be a weapon, but it is also a shield. Let us see which you choose." Joran nodded. He felt a thrill of danger, but also of opportunity. Here, in this alien court, human traits often dismissed as weaknesses, were his strength. No alien could predict fully the choices of a species guided by both logic and emotion, strategy and intuition. The queen rose from her throne, her movement fluid, almost gliding. The energy in the room shifted, and Joran realized she was testing him further. Perhaps she wanted to see if fear or hesitation would betray him. Perhaps she wanted to see courage. "Walk with me," she commanded, and he obeyed. The hall stretched endlessly, or so it seemed, filled with lights and reflections that made it hard to judge distance. Every step he took was measured, careful. He felt her awareness like a weight pressing against his mind, yet he refused to flinch. "You are alone here, human," she said softly. "Your people are far away. You have no allies among these walls except me if you prove yourself. Tell me, why should I trust you?" Joran did not speak. He could not. Instead, he slowed his pace, allowed himself to breathe evenly, and made his presence known as calm, deliberate, and aware. He showed trust without words, courage without a weapon. The queen watched, and he sensed her surprise. Perhaps she had expected fear. Perhaps she had expected rashness. Humans, she realized, could act without revealing all they thought. The hall ended in a vast chamber, circular and open to the sky. Stars, unfamiliar constellations, shimmered above. The queen stopped and turned to face him. The air was electric, charged with her psychic presence. Joran felt his heart beat faster, but he forced stillness. "You are unlike the others," she said. Her voice carried a weight that made the hairs on his arms stand. "Not in your size, not in your shape, but in your mind. You are quiet yet loud. You are small yet capable of great influence. This may be useful." Joran nodded again, not speaking. He understood that words could betray him. But his eyes, his posture, his very calmness, communicated respect, intelligence, and the ability to endure. The queen studied him for a long moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, she smiled. "You may remain. We will see what humans can truly offer. Perhaps, in time, you will surprise me further." For the first time, Joran felt a flicker of hope. The danger was real. The stakes were higher than he had imagined. But here, in the presence of a being who could hear all, human courage, patience, and ingenuity had spoken louder than words ever could. And though he did not say a word, he knew the queen had understood him. The first test was over. But many more lay ahead. The vast chamber settled into silence after the queen's words, but Joran could feel the hum of energy vibrating in the air. Stars glittered above like distant fires, yet the light inside the chamber seemed almost brighter than the cosmos outside. He had never been in a place where silence itself carried so much meaning. Every breath, every movement seemed magnified, and he had to remind himself that he was still human, vulnerable yet capable. The queen's eyes, glowing faintly, never left him. She studied him as though reading a complex map, tracing every corner of his mind. "Humans," she said, her voice calm yet carrying a subtle power, "rely on words too often. Your species believes words can contain thoughts, yet thought is larger than speech. You may learn this lesson here." Joran bowed slightly. He didn't speak because speaking would reveal more than he wanted. In that quiet, he realized how much humans relied on intuition. Here in this alien court, intuition was more than a survival skill. It was a shield. "Very well," the queen continued. "We will test you, not with weapons, not with words, but with choices. Watch, think, act. Do not speak. You may survive, if you are clever enough." The chamber shifted. The walls, once solid, seemed to dissolve into streams of light. Holographic images, or perhaps visions, appeared around him. Cities under attack. Diplomats negotiating fragile peace, soldiers frozen in tense stances, all moving and changing as if alive. Joran realized that these were not illusions, but tests. The Queen wanted to see how he reacted to scenarios he could not control, how he would think without speaking, without guidance. A voice echoed in his mind, not the Queen's words, but a thought clear and sharp. Observe, decide, respond. Joran focused, taking a slow breath. He moved toward one of the images, pointing subtly to indicate attention. A ripple of light responded and the scene paused. He realized quickly, the court could see not only what he did but how he thought. Any hesitation, any misstep would be noted. Hours, or was it minutes? Passed in that chamber. Joran moved silently among visions, guiding them, understanding them, predicting outcomes. The human mind, so adaptable, began to excel. Where the aliens had telepathy and logic, humans had creativity, empathy, and unpredictability. He noticed patterns in the tests and began to act in ways the aliens had not anticipated. Then a new vision appeared. A city under siege, but with civilians trapped in the chaos. Joran felt a pang of emotion. The Queen's tests were not just about strategy. They were about morality. Could he balance logic with compassion? Could a human act for others even when their survival was uncertain? He made a choice. He guided the scenario to save the civilians first, even though it might risk the city's defenses. Immediately, he felt a subtle shift in the air, almost like a breath passing over his skin. The Queen's presence grew stronger. He sensed her surprise and perhaps admiration. Humans, she seemed to think, were capable of actions that even telepathy could not fully predict. "You are unusual," she said, her voice calm but measured. "Your species acts with both mind and heart. Most beings I have observed act only with one. This is rare." Joran felt a quiet satisfaction, but he did not relax. He knew that admiration from the Queen did not mean safety. The next test would come, and it would be harder. Without warning, the chamber darkened. Shadows moved across the visions, twisting them into chaos. Alien soldiers appeared, approaching the humans in the scenarios. The civilians were scattered, and the cities were crumbling. Joran's heart raced, but he forced his breathing steady. Panic would not help. Here in this alien test, clarity was strength. He moved again, subtly manipulating the scenarios. He imagined paths for civilians to escape, guiding soldiers to defend without endangering others. He had no words, only gestures and thoughts, but the images responded. Slowly, the chaos began to resolve as if the Queen herself were watching closely, allowing him space to act. "You see, human," the Queen said finally, her eyes narrowing. "Your species is capable of improvisation. You respond to the unpredictable. You create order from chaos. This is both remarkable and dangerous." Joran did not respond verbally. He simply nodded, letting his calmness speak. He had learned long ago that humans could influence situations with presence alone. In this chamber, every instinct mattered, every micro-decision carried weight, and human intuition shone. The visions faded, leaving him standing alone in the starlit chamber. The Queen's gaze softened, though it never lost its intensity. "You have done well," she said. "But now we see your limits. Can you survive beyond this, when deception and threat are real, not visions?" Joran's eyes met hers. He knew she meant the real court, the real political games, the real dangers he could not yet see. He did not speak, but his posture, his steady breathing, his alertness communicated resolve. He was ready. A low murmur passed through the court, and Joran realized he was no longer alone. Other aliens, advisors, attendants, even young trainees had entered the chamber. They observed him with the same sharp intelligence, their minds brushing against his subtly, testing him without words. One stepped forward, a smaller being with eyes like liquid silver. It projected an image into his mind, a puzzle, a political dilemma. Joran recognized immediately that this was another test. This time it was not about immediate action, but long-term thinking. The aliens wanted to see how he would navigate complexity, how he would negotiate unseen consequences. He studied the image carefully. The puzzle involved trade disputes, alliances, and moral choices. Every option had a risk. Humans were not perfect planners, but they could improvise, adapt, and anticipate consequences in ways the aliens had not calculated. Slowly, he traced a solution in his mind, adjusting for each possible outcome, balancing logic with instinct. The small alien watched, its eyes narrowing. Joran realized it was impressed, though it did not show it openly. It was a silent acknowledgement. Humans were capable of creative problem-solving that defied alien prediction. Finally, the Queen spoke again. "You are interesting, human. Perhaps I have underestimated your species. You do not rely solely on thought or speech or force. You rely on something deeper, something I am only beginning to understand." Joran felt a flicker of pride, but he kept his focus. Pride could be dangerous. The tests were far from over. He had survived the first trials, but the court was vast, and the Queen's awareness was sharper than any weapon he had ever faced. "You may rest briefly," the Queen said, and the chamber shifted once more. The visions dissolved and the walls returned to solid, glowing structures. "But know this, human, every action, every hesitation, every thought, none of it escapes me. Continue to move carefully. Continue to act with wisdom, or you will fail." Joran bowed slightly and stepped back. His body was tense, but his mind was clear. He understood now that survival in the alien court required more than courage. It required patience, observation, and respect for forces he could barely comprehend. And yet he also understood that humans had a unique power here, the ability to act unpredictably, to combine logic and emotion, to adapt where others could not. He walked to a small alcove at the side of the chamber, where a gentle light bathed the area. Here, for a brief moment, he could think without immediate scrutiny. He considered the visions, the tests, and the subtle signals he had received. The Queen was curious. The court was cautious. And somewhere beneath their observation, he sensed the faintest acknowledgement of human strength. It was a fragile acknowledgement, easily lost if he misstepped, but it was there. And Joran knew that this was the beginning of a long, delicate dance between human ingenuity and alien perception. Above, the stars continued to shine, distant yet steady. The chamber hummed with quiet energy, alive with the Queen's awareness. And Joran, standing alone yet fully present, understood that silence was not empty here. It was powerful. Every unspoken thought, every deliberate action carried weight. And for the first time, he felt that humans, though small and fragile, could not only survive in this alien world, but could shape it in ways even the Queen had yet to imagine. Joran had barely recovered from the first trials when the Queen summoned him to a different part of the palace. This section of the city was quieter, almost serene compared to the vast, glittering hallways he had walked before. The walls curved gently, glowing softly as though the palace itself breathed. The air smelled faintly metallic, tinged with a sweet note that reminded him of alien flowers described in reports but unlike any plant he had ever encountered. "You move well. Human," the Queen said, her voice echoing slightly against the smooth walls. "But the court has many eyes, and not all of them are loyal. Observe carefully. Listen, even without words. You will need this skill soon." Joran nodded, although he could sense that mere nodding was not enough. He had already learned that in this empire, the Queen's words carried multiple layers of meaning. Her warning hinted at a threat he could not yet see. Humans were trained for negotiation, for diplomacy, but never had he faced a situation where thoughts themselves could betray him. They entered a long corridor lined with chambers. Each room seemed ordinary at first glance, but he noticed subtle differences, faint pulses of energy, the shimmer of walls that bent light in odd ways, and the occasional flicker of alien figures moving behind translucent barriers. It was a living palace, aware and responsive. "Some in my court would see humans as pawns," the Queen said. "They believe you are small, fragile, predictable. You must show them that you are none of these things. Intelligence and courage are your weapons. Subtlety is your shield." Joran listened without responding. He understood that words could betray him, even when spoken carefully. In the quiet of the corridor, he relied on the skills that humans often overlooked: observation, empathy, intuition, and creativity. Each of these was now more valuable than any report, any manual, any briefing. As they reached a central chamber, the Queen gestured for him to enter alone. "Here, human," she said, "you will begin to see the realities of my empire. Understand them, and you may influence the course of history. Fail, and the consequences will be permanent." Joran stepped inside. The room was vast, circular, and dimly lit. Screens, if they could be called that, hovered mid-air, projecting moving images of alien cities, fleets, and scattered outposts. Reports of trade, Resource distribution and political alliances unfolded around him in rapid sequences. It was information overload, far beyond what a human mind could usually process. But Joran did not panic. He had survived the Queen's previous tests. Now he needed to observe patterns, recognize inconsistencies, and uncover the hidden currents beneath what was presented. As he studied the projections, a shadow passed across the room. Joran turned slightly, sensing a presence he could not immediately see. A subtle pressure on his mind, faint yet intrusive, indicated another being, a spy within the court. He realized instantly that the Queen's warning had not been idle. Some in her empire were plotting. Humans, with their unpredictability, had attracted both curiosity and fear. He took a slow breath and focused. Humans were capable of improvisation in ways aliens often could not anticipate. He let his intuition guide him, mentally tracing patterns in the projections. The spy's presence became clear, a network of agents moving quietly through the empire, communicating in subtle ways the Queen might not immediately detect. This was the first revelation. Not all in the court were loyal to the Queen, and some might wish harm upon him. Joran realized that human diplomacy alone would not suffice. He would need strategy, subtlety, and courage, and he would need to earn the Queen's trust while navigating the hidden dangers around him. A voice sounded in his mind, calm and deep, unmistakably the Queen's. "What do you see, human?" Joran paused. He could speak, but the answer had to be precise. Even mental communication could reveal too much. Instead, he gestured toward the network of projections, indicating the hidden connections he had discovered. His eyes, steady and confident, conveyed the rest. The Queen's glow shifted, a subtle indication of her approval. "Clever," she said softly. "You perceive threats without being told. You act without being guided. This is human, and this is why you survive where others fail." Encouraged, Joran continued his observations. He noticed that the Empire's fleets were unusually scattered. Supply lines had gaps and communication channels were vulnerable. Normally, such flaws would have been exploited only by other aliens, who relied heavily on telepathy and patterns. Humans, however, were not constrained by predictability. He began to trace hypothetical paths, imagining where small decisive actions could create disproportionate influence. Hours passed in a blur of analysis. The projections, initially overwhelming, now formed a coherent picture. The Empire was strong, yes, but it was also fragile in ways few would expect. Its power lay in psychic control, but humans could navigate uncertainty, improvise, and exploit gaps in perception. Joran smiled faintly to himself. These were the advantages he brought to the table. Suddenly, the chamber shifted. The projections disappeared, replaced by a live simulation of the palace itself. Guards moved along corridors, courtiers whispered, and the faint presence of spies became more pronounced. Joran realized the Queen was testing him in real time, observing not only his analysis but also his ability to react under dynamic conditions. The first scenario unfolded. A message had been intercepted by rogue agents within the court. If the agents succeeded, human interest would be compromised and Joran's mission could fail. He had no direct means to communicate with anyone outside the chamber. He could not speak, could not use devices openly. He had to rely on strategy and the subtle influence of his presence. Joran moved, carefully adjusting his posture, his gaze, his mental focus. Humans had developed ways to lead without overt control. Here in the Queen's chamber, every micro-movement mattered. He imagined sending subtle signals to allies he could not see, cues that humans had used for centuries in diplomacy and negotiation. It worked. The simulation responded. Paths opened, messages were redirected, and the rogue agent's influence diminished. Joran felt a thrill of triumph. The Queen observed silently, her presence a constant reminder that he was under scrutiny. "You adapt," she said finally, her voice flowing like silk over steel. "You anticipate without certainty. You create solutions where none seem possible. This is why humans endure. You are resilient." The next scenario was harder. A direct confrontation emerged where rogue agents threatened both human and alien lives. Joran could not allow casualties, but he also could not rely on brute force. He relied on subtlety again, predicting the agents' actions and placing indirect obstacles in their path. Humans excelled at improvisation, and Joran's mind worked rapidly, analyzing, predicting, and acting in ways the alien projections could not anticipate. By the time the scenario resolved, Joran's heart pounded. He had succeeded, but only barely. The Queen's presence was stronger than ever. He could feel her examining him, analyzing every thought, every choice, every instinct, and he realized that the Queen's respect, though faintly conveyed, was genuine. Humans had earned acknowledgement in ways few alien species could manage. "Your species is unpredictable," she said finally, almost as if marveling aloud. "Not because you are chaotic, but because you combine reason with emotion, instinct with intellect. This combination is rare, powerful." Joran bowed slightly. He did not need to speak. The Queen understood. Humans had survived where other species might have failed. They had turned unpredictability into strength, intuition into a weapon, and compassion into influence. Then came the final test of the day. The Queen projected a vision of her own mind, vast and complex. It was a mental maze filled with her memories, her decisions, her fears, and her ambitions. Joran realized immediately that this was the ultimate test. Could a human navigate the mind of a being far beyond his species, understand her intentions, and act without faltering? He stepped forward, carefully observing the paths within the projection. He did not rush. Humans excelled at pattern recognition, empathy, and improvisation. He traced subtle connections, understood her choices, and predicted likely outcomes. The mental maze was vast, almost infinite, but he did not despair. He had learned to survive uncertainty, to act in silence, and to balance risk with intelligence. Hours passed. The Queen's presence was constant, but she did not interfere. She allowed him to explore, to make decisions, to learn and adapt. Finally, Joran emerged from the projection, exhausted but unbroken. He had navigated the complexity of a mind far beyond his own, and had done so with skill, patience, and humanity. The Queen regarded him. Her eyes glowed softly, a mixture of approval and quiet awe. "You have done more than survive, human. You have understood, adapted, and influenced without direct action. Few species could achieve this. Humans, you are remarkable." Joran felt a quiet pride, tempered with humility. He knew this was only the beginning. The Empire was vast, its secrets deep, and its politics treacherous. But humans had demonstrated a unique power, the ability to act unpredictably, to combine logic with intuition, and to influence events without relying solely on force or control. As he left the chamber, he realized the significance of what he had achieved. The Queen had acknowledged human potential not just as diplomats or warriors, but as thinkers, improvisers, and moral agents. In a court. The day had begun quietly, but Joran felt the tension in the palace like a living thing. The corridors seemed longer, darker than before, though the soft glow of alien light still bathed every surface. The palace, he realized, was more than a structure. It was a mind aware of all who walked its halls. And today, Joran knew, the stakes were higher. The Queen summoned him to a chamber he had never seen before. It was narrower than the great halls he had walked, yet the walls seemed to pulse with energy. As he stepped inside, he felt a subtle pressure on his mind, like invisible fingers brushing against his thoughts. The Queen's psychic presence was stronger here, sharper, more focused. "Human," she said, her voice calm yet carrying an edge of warning. "You have demonstrated adaptability and insight, but not all in my court are as loyal as you might hope. Some seek advantage through deception, and others through force. Today you will see what you truly face." Joran did not speak. He did not need to. Every human instinct told him to pay attention, observe, and adapt. He had learned that silence could be as powerful as words in the alien court. And now it was necessary. The Queen waved a hand and the walls of the chamber shifted. Holographic images appeared, showing the palace from above, its corridors and chambers filled with countless figures moving in calculated patterns. Joran noticed immediately that certain figures behaved differently, small anomalies, subtle deviations from expected routines. His intuition told him these were the agents of treachery, loyal not to the Queen but to their own ambitions. "See them, human?" the Queen said. "They believe they are hidden, but nothing escapes me. Yet you may perceive what even I cannot fully predict. Act wisely." Joran focused, tracing the movements of the rogue agents. Humans excelled at improvisation, at spotting patterns in chaos, at predicting actions based on subtle cues. He noted the paths they were likely to take, the communications they would attempt, and the vulnerabilities they might exploit. In his mind, he began to plan. forming strategies that relied on subtle influence rather than overt action. Hours passed as he analyzed, anticipated, and tested mental simulations. The palace seemed alive around him, shifting, reacting to his focus. The queen watched silently, her attention a constant presence, observing not only his decisions but the way he thought, the order in which he approached problems, and the subtle patterns in his observation. Then a sudden shift. One of the rogue agents appeared closer, moving deliberately toward a sensitive chamber that housed crucial information about both human and alien operations. Joran felt a flicker of alarm but did not panic. Humans thrived under pressure, often finding solutions where others saw none. He adjusted his approach, subtly signaling potential obstacles through mental cues and indirect gestures. The agent paused, sensing something, then altered its path slightly, enough to slow its progress. Joran allowed himself a quiet moment of satisfaction. His strategy had worked. Not through force, not through deception, but through anticipation and subtle guidance. Humans, he realized again, had a power aliens underestimated, the ability to improvise in ways that were invisible yet effective. The queen's voice echoed in his mind. Impressive, human. You influence events without speaking. You adapt without revealing your plan. But now comes the greater challenge. You must act not only to survive, but to protect others. The stakes are no longer personal, they are larger. Joran nodded slightly, understanding immediately. The rogue agents were not only a threat to him, they were a threat to diplomacy, to peace, to the fragile balance the queen maintained in her empire. Every choice he made now could ripple outward, affecting countless lives. The next scenario unfolded. He was presented with a vision of a critical council meeting, where decisions about military movements and trade agreements were to be made. Rogue agents had planted misinformation intended to provoke conflict between human and alien factions. If the council acted on it, war could erupt, undermining all progress. Joran studied the scenario. He could not intervene directly. Speaking, moving, or acting openly would reveal him. He had to find ways to influence outcomes without exposure. He focused, imagining subtle nudges, indirect influences that might guide participants to safer conclusions. His mind raced, balancing risk, intuition, and timing. The vision responded. A small gesture here, a shift in attention there, and the misinformation began to unravel. Council members questioned sources, reassessed assumptions, and acted cautiously. The potential crisis was averted, not by force, not by confrontation, but by insight, analysis, and strategic subtlety. The queen's presence intensified. You wield influence without wielding power, she said. This is human. You are not the largest, the strongest, or the fastest, yet you alter outcomes more than many of my own advisors. This is remarkable. Joran's mind was sharp, but he did not allow pride to settle. The empire was vast, its secrets deep, and dangers lurked in every shadow. Rogue agents were not the only threat. Political maneuvering, long-standing rivalries, and hidden alliances could shift rapidly, and humans had to anticipate not only what was visible, but also what lay beneath. He spent hours moving through mental simulations, tracing potential outcomes, adjusting strategies, and ensuring that the balance he maintained was both stable and flexible. Humans excelled at adaptation, and Joran's skills demonstrated that adaptability could rival even the most advanced psychic powers in influence and foresight. Finally, he sensed a realignment in the court. The queen's presence became less imposing, her observation still present but less intense. She had been watching him navigate chaos, anticipate threats, and act with discretion. His success had earned her quiet acknowledgement. Human, she said, her voice calm yet carrying weight. You have done more than survive. You have influenced events, protected lives, and uncovered threats. But the empire is not static. Threats grow, alliances shift, and even the most loyal may betray. You must remain vigilant. Your strength is not in what you see, but in what you can anticipate. Joran bowed slightly, understanding the gravity of her words. He had learned that survival in the alien court required more than courage. It required perception, patience, and adaptability. Humans, small and fragile though they seemed, could navigate complexity in ways that even psychic beings could not fully predict. The queen gestured, and the chamber shifted again. This time, the palace itself seemed to dissolve, revealing a starfield. Jorn realized they were observing not only the court but the Empire at large. Fleets moved in formation, trade routes shifted, and distant colonies sent messages along invisible networks. Rogue agents, though slowed by his interventions, still posed threats far from the capital. "You see now," the Queen said, "that influence extends beyond sight. You have altered outcomes here, yet beyond these walls challenges continue. Your species' resilience is your advantage. Few would endure as you have. Fewer still would succeed." Jorn's mind raced. Humans had always excelled in adversity, improvising in unpredictable situations. He began to trace the wider networks, noting where his interventions could have lasting impact. He realized that subtle guidance, strategic nudges, and observation could stabilize not only the court, but the entire Empire's fragile balance. Hours, or perhaps days, passed in this mental exploration. Jorn worked tirelessly, balancing human ingenuity against alien precision. Every choice was calculated yet flexible, every observation deliberate yet intuitive. By the time he paused, he had developed strategies that could protect diplomats, prevent conflict, and expose rogue agents without risking open confrontation. The Queen observed quietly. "You have surpassed expectation, human," she said softly. "You navigate complexity with a combination of insight, intuition, and restraint. You influence outcomes without force. This is rare, powerful, and it is why humans endure where others fail." A subtle smile appeared on Jorn's face. He had achieved recognition not through strength, not through technology, not through psychic power, but through human qualities often overlooked: perception, empathy, and adaptability. Yet he knew this was only the beginning. The Empire was vast, its threats numerous, and political intrigue never ceased. Rogue agents remained. Alliances could shift, and the Queen's trust, though genuine, was delicate. Every decision he made now could ripple outward, affecting lives, alliances, and the future of human-alien relations. He stepped back, allowing himself a brief moment of reflection. Humans had survived and thrived in countless unpredictable environments. Here in the alien empire, those same qualities, resilience, adaptability, ingenuity, were proving invaluable. And for the first time, Jorn felt that humans were not merely visitors or observers. They could shape events, influence outcomes, and earn respect even from beings far beyond their comprehension. The Queen's presence softened. "Rest, human," she said. "Tomorrow will bring new challenges. You have learned much, but the path ahead is never simple. Remember this: your strength lies not in what you see, but in what you can imagine and act upon. The Empire, fragile though it may appear, responds to perception, insight, and courage. You have all three." Jorn nodded. He left the chamber with a newfound sense of purpose. The palace, alive with observation, shimmered around him. He understood now that humans, though small and often underestimated, could. The palace hummed with a quiet energy, the faint glow of alien light reflecting off polished surfaces. Jorn walked through corridors that seemed alive, responding subtly to his presence. The previous trials, the visions, the rogue agents, all of it had prepared him for this moment. The Queen had summoned him to the central chamber once again. This time it was not merely observation. Today he would face the true test of influence, trust, and survival. The chamber was vast, stretching higher than any structure Jorn had ever seen. Transparent walls curved upward, revealing stars and distant planets beyond the palace. The floor was smooth, glowing faintly as if it were aware of each step he took. He stopped at the entrance, feeling the immense presence of the Queen waiting for him at the center. "Human," the Queen said, her voice calm but filled with weight. "You have proven insight, adaptability, and courage. You have navigated my court, uncovered threats, and influenced outcomes without force. But the greatest test remains. You must now act not only for yourself but for the future of our species and yours. Are you prepared?" Jorn nodded, though he did not speak. Silence had become his tool, his shield, and his way of communicating strength and awareness. The Queen's gaze, glowing faintly, seemed to penetrate every corner of his mind. He could feel her observing every thought, every calculation, every flicker of hesitation. "Very well," she said. "The Empire is on the brink. Rogue agents move freely in hidden networks. Some leaders are swayed by fear, others by ambition. Your task is to ensure stability, to protect those who cannot protect themselves, and to demonstrate the unique value of your species." The chamber shifted, and the palace itself seemed to dissolve around him. A network of glowing lines and points appeared, representing fleets, cities, trade routes, and hidden agents. Joran immediately understood. This was a simulation of the entire empire, showing its strengths, weaknesses, and vulnerabilities. His task was not simply to survive, it was to strategize, influence, and secure the future without overt force. He focused, tracing paths of potential danger, noting where rogue agents might strike, and where loyal allies could act. Humans excelled at improvisation, at creating solutions in unpredictable circumstances. Joran imagined subtle nudges, small adjustments that could shift outcomes, influence decisions, and protect lives without revealing his hand. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. Every scenario, every choice, every subtle mental influence was critical. Joran's mind worked tirelessly, balancing logic with intuition, empathy with strategy. He anticipated moves he could not see, accounted for intentions he could not fully read, and guided outcomes through observation and careful, deliberate action. The first major test arose when a faction of rogue agents attempted to seize control of a distant colony. The colony held critical resources and was strategically important for both human and alien interests. If the agents succeeded, the balance of power would shift dramatically. Joran could not intervene directly. His physical presence was irrelevant in a situation thousands of miles away. But humans had a skill the aliens underestimated: the ability to predict behavior, coordinate subtle influence, and act decisively when opportunity arose. He traced the agents' potential paths, anticipated their tactics, and imagined indirect ways to disrupt their plans. He projected subtle signals, mental nudges, and imagined consequences that would cause hesitation and confusion among the rogue faction. Slowly, methodically, the situation began to change. Agents hesitated, their communications faltered, and their influence weakened. The Queen observed silently, her gaze intense. "You are clever, human," she said softly. "You wield influence without power, guide outcomes without direct control. Few species could achieve this. Humans, you are remarkable." Encouraged, Joran moved to the next challenge. Communication networks had been compromised by agents attempting to spread misinformation between distant worlds. Messages could ignite fear, provoke conflict, or destabilize alliances. Humans had always excelled at creative problem-solving under pressure. Joran imagined ways to intercept the misinformation, redirect it subtly, and guide leaders to safe decisions. Every adjustment had to be precise. Any error could trigger disaster. He worked tirelessly, visualizing paths, anticipating reactions, and applying indirect influence where direct intervention was impossible. Slowly, the network stabilized and potential conflicts dissipated. Joran realized that humans' unpredictability, adaptability, and capacity for empathy gave him advantages even over psychic beings. He could act in ways that were invisible yet profoundly effective. Then came the third challenge. The Queen's voice echoed, calm but full of intensity. "You now face the most personal trial. Rogue agents threaten not only the Empire, but you and your people directly. You must navigate deception, danger, and hidden intentions. Will you succeed where others would fail?" Joran did not respond. He relied on observation, intuition, and careful calculation. Humans had survived countless threats on Earth through ingenuity, collaboration, and quick thinking. He applied the same principles now, mapping potential threats, predicting intentions, and identifying opportunities to neutralize danger without open confrontation. The simulation unfolded. Rogue agents moved silently through the palace, targeting strategic points. Some sought to harm humans, others aimed to manipulate alien leaders for personal gain. Joran's mind raced as he calculated paths, adjusted strategies, and imagined subtle interventions. He realized that sometimes the most powerful action was inaction, the ability to wait, observe, and act at the precise moment. Hours passed, but Joran's focus never wavered. Every decision mattered. Every subtle mental signal, every imagined consequence, every human instinct was deployed. Slowly, the rogue agents' plans began to unravel. Their influence weakened, their alliances faltered, and the immediate threats were neutralized without confrontation or violence. The Queen's voice returned, calm but with unmistakable respect. "You have succeeded, human. Not through strength, not through speed, not through psychic power, but through intellect, empathy, and adaptability. This is why humans endure. This is why your species is remarkable." Joran allowed himself a brief moment of satisfaction but did not relax. The empire was vast and threats remained beyond the immediate view of the palace. Yet he understood something profound. Humans could act in ways even the most advanced psychic species could not predict. Creativity, intuition, and moral judgment were weapons as potent as any technology or psychic skill. As the final trial continued, Joran focused on consolidating trust. Alien leaders, diplomats, and even lower-ranking officials observed his actions, sometimes subtly, sometimes openly. He could feel their curiosity, their wariness, and occasionally their admiration. Humans had earned a reputation for unpredictability, but they had also demonstrated competence, insight, and moral clarity. Through careful observation and subtle guidance, Joran began influencing alien leaders to act in harmony with the Empire's interests while respecting human needs. He applied empathy to predict reactions, creativity to find solutions, and moral judgment to guide outcomes. Slowly, trust began to build, not only between humans and the Queen but also among various alien factions. The Queen's presence remained constant, though less imposing now. She had observed every decision, every choice, every instinct. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying weight and clarity. "Human, you have demonstrated what few species could. You have acted with courage, insight, and compassion. You have influenced outcomes without force, guided decisions without authority, and protected life without direct confrontation. You are worthy of recognition." Joran bowed slightly. Words were unnecessary. The Queen understood his intentions, his courage, and his intellect. In the silence of the palace, mutual respect was established, a rare achievement between species separated by countless differences in perception, ability, and culture. But the trials were not over. Beyond the palace, rogue agents remained, hidden alliances persisted, and distant colonies faced threats. Joran realized that influence and trust must extend beyond immediate success. Humans could guide, predict, and stabilize, but the Empire required ongoing vigilance, diplomacy, and subtlety. Over the following days, Joran coordinated with loyal alien leaders, applying the principles he had demonstrated in the trials. Humans excelled at improvisation, and he used this skill to anticipate threats, mediate disputes, and build cooperative networks. Slowly, the rogue agents were neutralized or integrated into the system in ways that minimized risk. Political factions found common ground, trade networks stabilized, and distant colonies received guidance without feeling coerced. Throughout it all, the Queen observed silently, her respect growing. Humans, she realized, were capable of acting in ways she could not predict. Their resilience, ingenuity, and empathy allowed them to influence events across vast distances, manage complex networks of information, and build trust where others might fail. At the conclusion of these efforts, the Queen formally addressed the human delegation. Her glowing eyes focused on Joran, her voice calm but resonant. "You have proven that humans are not pawns, not observers, and not weak. You are thinkers, improvisers, and moral agents. You have earned trust, stabilized,